Okay, welcome to part 8 of our study in the nature of God. And again, I'm writing the vision large. So those of you watching this on YouTube, this is just writing it large. If we go into it in detail, we'll be a year in each section, which is a wonderful study. We've done that and spent a lot of time in Bible college and in church. But this is just writing it large for your sake. So bear with us, please, and hopefully, Lord willing, someday we can be together in a Bible study here at church, and we can bring you more of the details and fine-tuning. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 20 for your notes. I'm sorry, Deuteronomy 4, let me start at verse 35 instead. It says, "To you it was shown that you might know that Yahwah, the name of the Father, He is God, and there is no other beside Him." Now let me ask you something. Is that clear? Yes. That's clear. Is the Athanasian Creed clear? No, that's confusion. And God is not the God of confusion or instability. He is stable, unlike those who wrote that creed. And I don't mean that facetiously, that they are just mentally unstable. I mean they are given over to spirits that lead them into that confusion. Because it is the spirit of error. It's not the Spirit of God that brought that confusion. It's as clear as it can be. He is Yahweh. He is God, and there's no other beside Him. Yahweh, you see in the Old Testament, if you see capital L-O-R-D, Lord, that is in the Hebrew, Yahweh. In the English, it's more like Jehovah. I prefer the Hebrew, and so as you will see in many translations. Let's stay in Deuteronomy, but go a little bit further to Deuteronomy 32, verse 39. Let's see here. It says this: "See now that I am He, and there is no God beside me. It is I who put to death and give life." Can it be any clearer than that? I mean, that's clear. I am He, singular. There is no one else. It is as clear as can be. And how did God mean it? How did Moses take it? Moses taught Israel, and Israel to this day is taught from the descendants. How did Moses take these verses? He took them like this: I don't need any other God but you. You are God alone. You are who you say. You are just God. You are God alone. Let's go to the New Testament, further on to the prophets, Jeremiah, chapter 44, and start at verse 6. "Thus saith Yahweh, the King of Israel." Then it says, they supplied, "and His Redeemer, the Lord of hosts." It's literally King of Israel, Redeemer. Yahweh of hosts. "I am the first, and I am the last, and there is no God beside me." Oh, wow. Is that clear? Yes. That's as clear as can be. And the Jews knew exactly what it meant. One God, not multiple gods in one. Not a family of gods. One God. They were so distinct from the nations around them that it actually bothered them. It bothered them a lot. Because the nations around them had a god for everything. When they came out of Egypt, they had been taught by the Egyptians, oh, the god of the flies, the god of the fields, the god of fertility, the god of the dung, the god of the Nile, the god of the alligator, the god of the storm. And they had gods everywhere. They had all kinds of gods. Just like if you look in St. Peter's Cathedral to this day, you go inside, you will see carvings of all the ancient gods. Why are they in there? Why are they in there? You'll see everything. The Irish talking head of the god of the forest. And then this head would float through the forest and then appear in trees and then would manifest through the bark of trees. And they'd worship the tree as the god of the forest. That's depicted in St. Peter's. It's all over. The Ashtaroth poles, which are phallic symbols, which Israel was judged for over and over and over again for worshiping to the Ashtaroth poles. There's 4 of them that hold up the canopy of the Pope. All of the ancient symbols, they're there. All of the paganism, all mixed into one. And that's where the Trinity came from. It's just a continuation of the pagan practices, the continuation of the pagan gods. Isaiah 45, verse 18. For thus saith the Lord who created the heavens. He is the God who formed the earth and made it. He established it and did not create it a waste place, but formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh, and there is none else. Now notice, the God that created the heavens, he says here in the Old Testament, is Yahweh. The Trinity tells us that, no, God number 2 created the heavens, who became the Son. God number 2 created all the heavens and the earth. But the Old Testament clearly tells us it was Yahweh, the Father, who created the heavens and the earth. You know, you wonder, does it really matter? Do these things really matter? Yes. Oh, yes, they do. They matter completely. Because we either believe a lie or we believe a truth. If you believe a lie, why even bother? It won't save you. It won't keep you from future judgments. And you have no hope if you believe the lie. If you're willing to knowingly believe a lie, you have no hope. Because now you have no solid rock to stand on. Because the lie is not solid. It's sand. It's shifting sand. And it'll change in a heartbeat. But if you stand on truth, you stand on a rock. And that rock is a mountain under that sand. And you stand there and you just nail your feet, your shoes to that rock, and you won't be moved. Truth matters. It matters. It matters to God. The Lord judged Israel because they saw all of the nations around them had all these multiple gods, and they thought, oh, isn't that cool? They've got all these multiple gods, and they can get help for anything. If we have a bad year, we only have one God to go to. So he must be so busy taking care of everything all by himself, he can't handle it. He needs some help. So we're going to go and we're going to worship, worship Ashtaroth, yeah. Because Ashtaroth, the goddess of fertility, surely will give us better crops, make our fields fertile. So they go to the priestess of Ashtaroth, they were women, and they say, what do we need to be blessed of Ashtaroth? And that witch will stand there and just smile and say, give me your firstborn. Give me your firstborn. Don't you know demons always demand blood? The blood of the innocent. They always do. And Israel did it. They brought their firstborn in this big bronze statue with its arms out like this, both of Ashtaroth and of Baal. And it was hollow in bronze, and they'd put a fire in the back of it, and it'd get glowing red hot, and at sunset, its eyes would glow with fire, and they'd put a baby in its outreached hands. And that's how the baby died, being roasted alive. And then they said, now the God will bless you. Now the God will bless you. Or the goddess will bless you. How demonic. How demonic. So God has demanded that we separate ourselves from those things and walk holy and pure before Him. But brethren, those same demon idols have been mixed into Catholicism, and they're there to this day. You can look that up in the Catholic Encyclopedia. They tell it themselves. They show it themselves. I knew a man, you knew him also, writing a book about this, and got some rare ancient pictures of the inside of St. Peter's. And Brother Mike did a great job. I was really sorry to see that his book didn't hit the press. I wanted a copy. But it's incredible inside. The revealing inside that place is just astonishing. He showed us a slideshow of the inside. Remember that? And it was incredible. It's so demonic. It's just amazing. Well, that is all wrapped up in these demonic doctrines, and the chief of which is the family gods. The family gods. And second, but maybe not second, maybe also that's right equal with it, is the nature of the heart of God displayed in who is saved and who's not. In other words, who ends up in eternal punishments or doesn't, or is there eternal punishments or there isn't? Those questions are answered in our first videos, showing there is no such thing as eternal punishment, revealing the heart of God. And so if you confuse that, if you say, no, his heart is the heart of a monster that will roast his children forever, that goes right along with the three-headed God. It's the same thing. It's the same lie. Shows the same nature. Okay, Deuteronomy, let's go there. Chapter 6, verse 4. This is called the Great Shema. The Great Shema. And it is recited by every Jew. Everywhere they have a religious ceremony of any sort, or a holy day, which we get our word holiday from. They always say this: Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one. Could it be any clearer than that? Yahweh is one. It's called the Great Shema, or the Great Shout. Now it's interesting, the woman took leaven, as we saw in Matthew 13:33, and tried to mix it within the whole Bible, the whole group of meal, until it was mixed up in there thoroughly. So they tried to come up with an answer for Deuteronomy 6:4. And what can it mean? What can it mean? How can we make this show that it isn't really one? How can we make it show that it isn't really one? Well, here's just in a nutshell how they tried to do this. The word God there is Elohim. Brown, Driver, and Briggs describes Elohim as a plural of majesty. A plural of majesty when it has anything to do with God. And then because Elohim is a plural, it's a plural of majesty, then the Trinitarians say, see, there's more than one there. And then they try to say that the word one, which is echad, actually means more than one. And that's a lie. Because it doesn't. It means one and one alone. It can be modified by the context. In other words, one family. It's really not actually, I take it back, it's not actually modifying the word one. It's still saying what? How many families? One. But they say, see a family, and this is what they'll tell you. See, a family is made up of many members. So that word one can actually mean many. No. What is one denoting? How many of whatever the subject is. So when it says Yahweh is one, how many Yahwehs are there? One. And Yahweh is the name of the Father. There isn't a Father, not God one, a Father, God two, and a Father, God three. There is or a Father God too. There is a one Father. Yahweh is one. The word God or Elohim can refer to magistrates. It can refer to kings. It can refer to many things. But when it refers to God, it refers to God, Brown Driver Briggs tells us, as a plural of majesty. In other words, here's the deal. Moses has been commanded by God to describe God to the people. Because the people just came out of Egypt. They're sitting in front of Mount Sinai. And they're sitting there and they're full of paganism. 450 years worth. Isn't that amazing? Far longer than we've been a nation. They were under the rule and thumb of Egypt. You better bow to our gods or else. And so they took on the gods of the Nile. They took on the gods of the flies. They took on the gods of this and the gods of that. So when Moses then is commanded by Yahweh to describe God to the people, what's the first thing he's going to say? He's going to say, God, plural of majesty, is Yahweh. So Elohim, all of the attributes of anything, of any God, is all in one God, Yahweh. In other words, you don't need separate gods. You don't need a God of the flies. You don't need a God of the dung. You don't need a God of the river. You don't need a God of the bushes. You don't need a God of the fruit, and so forth. Everything that you need is in this one individual called Yahweh. That's all it means. It's just that simple. If you put a bunch of leaven in there and try to explain it differently, then people get really confused. But here, now listen to the testimony of the priests of the world. That Yahweh set out to give a testimony to all of us to this very day. Yahweh is one. They thoroughly, totally reject the Trinity. They look at Christians as pagans. Why do you think one of the main reasons Jews look at Christians as pagans is because of this? Muslims look at Christians as pagans because they go, you're polytheists. They can read the Athanasian Creed. They see what's really being taught there. You're polytheists. And even the Muslims know that God's one. Isn't that amazing? Okay. We'll end here on video number 8, and I'll see you at video number